Everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my first draft for Club World Cup Fantasy. I've already made a previous live stream on how to play the game, so if you're interested in sort of just a little bit more of an informal video looking at me reading the rules and going through what I thought are the key takeaways, you know, from a little bit of an analytics perspective as well, from a data perspective, I've spent this week actually looking at lineups, looking at, you know, key things like penalty takers, free kick takers, just players with really good underlying baselines, trying to understand, you know, my collective thoughts on team strengths from clubs from different teams around the world. I've also been looking at the rules, you know, just going back to the how to play segment. I think the most critical and beautiful rule coming from this game is the rule that you can get +2 points for any players that score over 4 points in a game that have less than 5% ownership. So a lot of my draft will be themed around this concept. Not that all of my players are sub 5% owned, not at all. But I think I've chosen a fair amount of players that I think actually have really good value on the basis of market odds. And I'll be using that to kind of illustrate my Matchday 1 draft. Another reason why I'm going with the draft that I am is I'm choosing to pursue a strategy of a wild card in Matchday 2. The idea being that some teams that I really like for Matchday 2 and 3 specifically to target as a bunch have a really bad game in Matchday 1. So Paris is a very good example of that, where they face off versus Atletico Madrid in Matchday 1. So, you know, starting a draft without Paris players and then moving straight into them makes a lot of sense for me. Conversely, for example, a team like Bayern that have an amazing Matchday 1 have a really poor Matchday 3 when they face off versus Benfica. So I kind of see this as an opportunity to actually, you know, go deep into the Bayern players, move into more Real Madrid and PSG type players that have really good Matchdays 2 and 3. But I think there are different tournaments and different styles of play, right? I've seen a lot of people go for Matchdays 3 as a wildcard opportunity, simply because, and I think FPL Tom and Fantasy Football are both sort of pursuing a similar strategy to this, where you're looking at actually teams that have a really good Matchday 1 and 2. You're expecting rotation in Matchday 3, therefore you wildcard in Matchday 3. One thing I will say about this tournament is that the rules actually incentivizes taking hits, and it also incentivizes actually change your team around as much as possible to try and maximize on value. Because actually, compared to other fantasy games, you're actually getting +1 points for goals scored or even clean sheets in all positions, right? Instead of 4 points for a clean sheet, it's 5 for goalkeepers and defenders. For goals scored, it's +1 for every position compared to, let's say, FPL or even UCL Fantasy. So that is very incredible. And then a hit is only 3 points. So you can kind of see my point in terms of this tournament actually does incentivize, I think, a lot more activity. And I think that's exciting. And that differential rule is the cake on top. So before I actually jump into the team selection, as I said, I'm pursuing a Matchday 1 free hit. Why am I doing this? Because I'm going for a Matchday 2 wildcard. So I'm purely looking at Matchday 1. Another reason why I'm doing this is because we're not going to get, I think, you know, odds level detail of Matchday 2. I think I'm going to be able to kind of maximize on a lot of these teams here in Matchday 1. And it's an exciting opportunity to kind of maybe take away my thoughts on the teams, a lot of these leagues facing off for the first time, and then actually recalibrating my thoughts as soon as Matchday 2 comes, as opposed to sort of allowing players to play for 2 match days and then sort of re-evaluating with the Matchday 3 free hit. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I have presented some of the market odds, and this is shared and sort of compiled by my friend FPL Schadenfreudist with a 1 on Twitter. He does a UCL fantasy model, so do have a look at, you know, his quality production of modeling data. But for this tournament, he's providing me with the Matchday odds, and here they are, and it's all its glory. I think from a defensive point of view, clearly we just want to look at those clean sheet odds. And I think just jumping into the discussion briefly before I actually show you my team, it makes a lot of sense to go for a defender, particularly a central defender or a goalkeeper that has less than 5% ownership, as long as you think that that player isn't, you know, miles and miles far away from their counterparts, like let's say the attacking fullbacks in their teams. Not only are you going to be saving money, but actually that +2 differential point system really makes a huge difference in terms of actually being able to kind of level the playing field between, you know, center backs who are just getting points for being center backs and getting clean sheets, as opposed to these fullbacks, let's say the likes of Hakimi, Dumfries, at times, who are much more attacking than their peers. I do think, though, still, some of these fullbacks are absolutely incredible. So there's still going to be more than an expected difference or point, let's say, difference of 1 or 1.x points, where you still might want to go for those attacking fullbacks if the fixture is really, really good. In Matchday 1 specifically, what are the good fixtures? It's Bayern Munich versus Auckland, it's Man City versus Casablanca, it's Juventus as well, and their fixture. Flamengo too are very, very high up in clean sheet odds. So what does this kind of immediately tell me to do? I think, first of all, we're not going to be able to ignore the world where Bayern Munich and Man City are going to do well, and we ignore their players because we're pursuing differentials. I think I will have to go triple Bayern Munich or even quadruple Bayern Munich. As far as, let's say, Man City, it's a bit of a weird team to pick from, because I think what we've learned from this end of the FPL season is that De Bruyne is not playing for the Club World Cup. He was one of the interesting attackers to go for. They don't have too much depth at City right now, but they're actually still in the process of buying new players. And I think the only guarantees right now is that the center backs are probably going to be Akanji, Diaz, and Guardiola, these types of players. And it's very hard to say where else you can go, right? Ederson is another good pick outside of Haaland, and Haaland's like the main pick that a lot of people will go for. Marmoush is probably quite interesting as well, but he does take up a forward spot, which I think for the purposes of match day one and overall for the course of the tournament, considering his price, isn't very, very effective. So I really like going for Haaland, but from a defensive point of view, so many defenders are on offer. The issue is that Matheus Nunes is actually going to be a midfielder and Rico Lewis is a defender. So I think it's also tough to kind of call who's necessarily going to start in each game. So I think that's already a very, very tricky piece. With Juventus, you have an option like, for example, Lloyd Kelly, that makes a lot of sense, right? From a differential point of view, a center back, for example, that has less than 5% ownership. When it comes to, let's say, some of the other players that I think I would target, I think Flamengo defenders make a lot of sense, right? The goalkeeper is right there for you. You have Wesley, you have some other defenders as well from Flamengo that could make sense, like Ortiz, but Wesley's probably the cheapest pick that I actually quite like, and he's sub 5% ownership. So I'm all over that. And then Real Madrid, Chelsea, River Plate, these are some other teams that are very close in terms of odds. Dortmund, Inter Milan, a little bit lagging behind. Benfica as well. When it comes to flipping that on the head, right? What about expected goals? Expected goals favor very much Bayern Munich and City once again, then Juventus and Real Madrid actually. And it's interesting, of course, because now you can see there are teams that you might want to target more from an attacking perspective and teams that you want to target more from a defensive perspective. There are some world rankings that are available, like Opta has club world rankings, but they don't necessarily rate teams on the difference of attack and defense. And here in a fantasy game, you're kind of looking at the two sides of the coin. So clearly, of course, a little bit more favoriting, let's say, the Real Madrid clean sheet, or rather, sorry, the Real Madrid goal scoring opportunities. Same with Chelsea, I think, from what I can see in this graphic, and Dortmund. But that's an interesting kind of story. I think that some of the teams that are actually doing quite well on a lot of these metrics that will probably be a little bit unheard of or not so popular would be definitely Botafogo in match day one. I think Inter Miami actually have some pretty good odds considering that they're playing at home. Another team that might be less invested into, as I said, is going to be Flamengo. But we also actually have, some not too bad fixtures from the perspective of, let's say, a Porto or a Red Bull Salzburg. And so I think that's an interesting perspective. Some of the other teams, of course, unfortunately, just aren't on my mind, because I think the expectation, unfortunately, is that they will struggle or that they'll have better games in match day 2 and 3. And so for the purposes of match day 1, I'm not really evaluating from them. But my team now from defense, if we just jump straight into the draft now that I've talked for long enough, is actually going to be quite compact, I think, when it comes to, let's say, the actual defenders that I'm going for. So I will be going for Wesley, that I've already previously mentioned. My goalkeeping pair is going to be Armani and Rossi. Armani is actually currently above 5% ownership. So I have been evaluating maybe changing Armani in the future, because, what's the purpose of actually going for a goalkeeper that is, over 5% ownership? In my opinion, I think if I think there's a slightly worse goalkeeper, for example, but more expensive, unfortunately. And the beauty, I think, of some of these River Plate players is that they're super cheap. Armani is 4 million and actually has a really good game in match day 1. So he's a bit of a no-brainer from that perspective. I just think right now I haven't been able to find a draft that I really like that doesn't have Armani in it, but I could evaluate in the future. So Armani stays in the team for now. Rossi has a great game. They actually both technically play UK time, within the same day, but the rules of this tournament mean that you can actually substitute players after they've played and before they've played, right? So instead of like UCL Fantasy, where you almost have to wait a full day to actually make your substitution changes, you can actually actively make substitutions manually, very similar to, let's say, the international tournaments that we've seen so far. So that is something that I think is worth pointing out and quite helpful for a lot of people making these kinds of decisions. So the rest of my defense is going to be Alex Telles, who actually just took a penalty yesterday for Botafogo. So I think that's a good opportunity to jump into a penalty-taking defender. I believe there's another penalty-taking defender for Palmeiras, but Palmeiras don't have a great game for match day 1 necessarily, or I actually am planning to play an attacker against Palmeiras, so I don't really want to go into that player. But I believe there is a left back for Palmeiras who will be taking penalties, and he will definitely feature on the cheat sheet. So the rest of my defense is going to have some pretty popular fullback options. The one fullback option that I don't have clearly is Rafael Guerrero, who I think is going to be quite popular and very, very strong. And for the perspective of actually targeting Bayern and the extremely high expected goals, I think this is probably going to be the most one-sided game of the tournament on paper. We don't know how that Bayern game is going to pan out. I remember a game versus Slovan Bratislava where they didn't actually achieve the expected goal expectations of the market. But this is still a game where I would definitely target Bayern. And I think the concern is that a lot of players could be subbed early for Bayern. But you also need to know that Musiala is coming back from an injury. So he's unlikely to feature, in my perspective, as a starter in match day 1. And then Upamecano, I think, it might even come later into the tournament because he's still dealing with a long-term injury. So I am going with Cambiasso here, who I think is probably the most intriguing fullback option outside of the teams like City, outside of the teams like Bayern, who have extremely one-sided games. I'm going for Manuel Akanji, hoping that he starts here because I think we saw at the end of the season, as soon as Akanji came back and as soon as Diaz was fit, that these were the players that were prioritized in terms of, playing actual games. It might be the case, of course, that Ryan Aït-Nouri joins the team and he actually starts in match day 1, which could mean that Akanji could sit on the bench. But I think that I'm just going to chance it for match day 1. I think Akanji will be here. The alternative, unfortunately, with Diaz and Ederson is actually their ownership is above 5%, whereas Akanji is clearly the pick that I've gone for here because he's sub 5% in terms of ownership. As far as, let's say, other players, I've gone for Guardiola, of course, who we know is just someone that's very hard to drop, especially if I think he'll play left back. If he does, let's say play center back, I might actually find an opportunity to move away from Guardiola or even pursue, let's say, some of the midfielders in Man City. If we can get a little bit more understanding of, who's going to play what. Wesley is the player that I've gone for from Flamengo. He's the cheapest defender that I think makes a lot of sense and someone who still actually has pretty good expected goal involvement for a defender. And so on that basis, with his effective ownership, Wesley makes a lot of sense for me. So that's basically the defense that I've gone for. And Rossi, of course, backing up. The reason why I've actually gone for kind of stacks of defenders is because I think that almost backing good results for certain teams makes a lot more sense to me than, let's say, picking purely just almost talismanic defenders from each teams, right? At the end of the day, I think where's my bread going to be buttered? It's mostly going to be coming from these clean sheet points. So targeting teams that actually have the highest clean sheet odds makes the most sense for me. I think Chelsea's a little bit underrated as well from a perspective of match day 1. I think definitely we could invest more into them. And right now, Di Gregorio is, I think, just above 5% in ownership. So he actually fell out of one of my recent draft templates, but I clearly maybe am under invested into Juventus for this match, but their players are quite expensive. Alex Kelly is someone that I have been looking into, or Lloyd Kelly, sorry. I don't know why I'm thinking about Alex, but Lloyd Kelly is someone that I'm definitely looking into for this Juventus team. But my only concern, I suppose, is that I think I could actually get points or more points elsewhere just due to the penalty taking abilities of Alex Telles. And ultimately, I kind of like the double stack of Wesley and Rossi as well. But it's a price difference thing too, where Wesley is cheaper than Lloyd Kelly. And unfortunately, with the 0.3 budget that I have right now, I can't necessarily afford him. But he's definitely one of the other picks that I'd be looking into for this match day, alongside some other Chelsea defenders, if I see that the odds have a little bit more movement. As far as, let's say, the midfield, shifting over to that, we did talk about, hey, how many projected goals are there for certain players? I think there are clear talismans in the game. I think they're very hard to ignore. Franco Mastantuono from River Plate is potentially someone who's on penalties. He's already taken some penalties for his team. I wouldn't be confident to say 100% he takes all penalties for River Plate, but because Borja is around. But I think Mastantuono does so much for the team and is so good for the game outside of his ownership being over 5%. In the sense that he is kind of the main outlet of the team. A lot of the chances created will be coming from him, and he still has really good expected goal involvement for this squad. I think the same can easily be said for De Arrascaeta from Flamengo too. So I have a triple stack in Flamengo, and he is basically the full talisman of the team, likely to take penalties if Pedro doesn't start the game as well. Pedro is recently coming back, I believe, from an ACL injury, and so Bruno Henrique has been playing up top. That allows our friend here from Uruguay to actually get more minutes technically, and also just more penalty share. So I think that's huge. Palmer is in the squad. I'm sure a lot of people who've played FPL with me know that Palmer's been extremely disappointing. But I can say probably, outside of the Premier League, he's actually done quite well within a lot of competitions. He got 2 assists within the final of the Conference League. And I still think, as the penalty taker of Chelsea, I think he's an amazing pick. I did actually try to force as much team value into some cheaper players like Franco Mastantuono, like Armani as well, to get Palmer into my squad. Previously, one of the drafts that I actually shared on a live stream with FPL Tom actually didn't have Palmer. It had Enzo Fernandez at the time, but I have reevaluated and actually gone for Palmer within my squad. The differential within my midfield, because I don't think there are many differentials if I'm honest, is Gnabry. Olise is a bit of a lock. His ownership is sky high. He will be my vice captain for this match day most likely. But Gnabry is a pick that I think is quite safe for match day 1 because I'm only targeting Bayern for 1 game. I'm not expecting rotation in match day 2 or 3 because I don't have to care about it. So for someone who's just targeting match day 1, with news that let's say Koeman might be on the outs for Bayern and Sane actually not playing a lot of the games closing the season, even though Musiala was out injured, I think Gnabry's minutes have actually been the safest and the strongest. We know that Thomas Muller has left the club as well. So I really, really like this opportunity to go for Gnabry here. I think his minutes will be strong for match day 1, and that's all I'm looking for, right? Musiala can come back into the team, as I mentioned, because he's coming back from an injury, but I can't see why he would be risked to just immediately start match day 1. So hence why I think Gnabry makes a lot of sense as the pick to go for from Bayern, who is now currently sub 5% in ownership and probably is going to get a lot of minutes versus this really poor Auckland team. So that's going to be my midfield. And then in the front end, I'm actually choosing to go with Samu Omeridian, who is in the game Agehoa as well. I think he prefers being called by this name, so I will just call him Samu as well, because I think that's probably what people would recognize, at least from his first name. So Samu, Kane, and Haaland. And look, I did talk about the 12th man, and the 12th man is going to be Kylian Mbappe. So the opportunity here with the 12th man is that you can actually extend your budget. Technically, the budget that I'm actually using right now is, I believe, something like 111.7 million, because I'm actually effectively just putting Mbappe on top of my team, and that's fun, right? Why not? So instead of maybe, let's say, triple captaining on Kane effectively, or maximum captaining on Kane, I have decided to go with Mbappe here. It might be the wrong decision because technically I think there might not be a better captaincy option than Kane for the rest of this tournament. But I really do like Mbappe as a pick as well. And it kind of covers his ownership whilst allowing me to have almost the differential of having all 3 players. If Kane flops, I feel, then I won't feel so bad because most people will be captaining Kane. But if all 3 forwards, go crazy to a similar extent, I think I'll probably be able to win out there. There's also an opportunity, I think, to go for Rafael Guerreiro. I think he's a really good pick because I find it very hard to believe that this Bayern team will not get a clean sheet versus Auckland City. You can see that the expected goals for Auckland City, I think, are something like 0.25, which, it really, really never, ever gets that low. Looking at odds, looking at Champions League, looking at playing Premier League for a long time now, you don't see these odds on offer. So it makes a lot of sense to go for a Bayern defender, particularly as someone who actually has, abilities to get into attacking sort of forays and things like that. But the only thing sort of drawing me back towards Rafael Guerreiro is his ownership is also already above 5%. So that takes away from a little bit of the appeal. So then it becomes a straight shootout between him and Mbappe. And I think I'd go for Mbappe right now. Those are where my thoughts lie, because I just think that Mbappe's minutes are also a little bit more nailed on compared to, let's say, Rafael Guerreiro. So I think that's a plus. As you can see with France versus Spain, the later the game goes on, the more chances Mbappe has to score, which is just a plus. And that's going to be the team selection for this match day. So the way it's going to field in terms of, what my bench is looking like is we know that there's manual substitutions, right? So all you need to really do in terms of your benching behavior is actually put the players who actually have the games further down the line in match day 1 a little bit later. And so my bench is going to be right now Armani, Cambiasso, Guardiola, and Haaland. Akanji's in the team right now, but it doesn't really matter. Mbappe's my 12th man, so I'll be fielding Rossi, Wesley, Akanji, Asantuono, Olise, Gnabry, De Arrascaeta, Palmer, Samu Omeridian, and Kane. And I'm planning to captain Kane. I didn't talk about this much, but Kane is the most obvious pick for captaincy. And then I think it's actually Olise, right? So it's probably going to be close between players like Olise and maybe the likes of Haaland as well. Sorry about the timer if you actually hear this in the video. Hopefully it didn't get captured. But those are the types of picks that I think I would be going for at this moment in time. I think they're the strongest options that you can actually bank on, really. So those are where my thoughts are right now. I think as we go closer towards the tournaments, we know that the odds will move. We know that we might even get, more news in terms of how to interpret some of these teams a little bit better. We might even get transfer news that can change my thoughts. But I will be sharing my preliminary version of the cheat sheet. I don't think there are going to be massive changes in the cheat sheet because we're 1 week out, and I don't think there's going to be massive transfers. But that's it for now. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys soon.